Hello, and welcome to our small YouTube video on some of the quirks and interesting features of MDT, otherwise known as Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. My name is Cameron, and without further ado, let's jump right in. Here's our little slice of paradise, or also known as our MDT server. Now, MDT, if you don't know, is a unified collection of tools, processes, and guidance for automating desktop and server deployments. Our main focus today will be on the monitoring and logging features we have configured and how they function. Let's get into our MDT software. We will expand our deployment share and navigate to the bottom of the options where it says monitoring. Currently in our environment, we have two workstation deployments that we use the monitoring service for. Before showing you what's included in these files, let's go ahead and show you how to enable monitoring first. Our first step is going to be right-clicking on your MDT shared folder and select Properties. Once in the Properties, you'll see a tab labeled Monitoring. In the Monitoring tab, you should see an option to enable the deployment share. Once this box is checked, you will need to specify the MDT server by name or by its IP address. And for these ports, the 9800 and the 9801, you can leave those as blank. Let's move over to the Rules tab now and add a line to the default section. We are going to enter event service equals http:// your server name : port 9800. This will tell the MDT deployments to output any files from the monitoring service to this particular server. Now that we have the service enabled, let's go over to the task manager and actually start the service. Keep in mind that by default, this service should be started automatically. But for our deployment, we actually had to go in and turn this on manually. So this is a good place to just double check. You may be asking as well now, do I have to run a deployment to actually test if this is working? Well, no. After this point, we can test the functionality of the monitoring service by going to a web browser and pulling up this website, http://localhost:9800/MDT monitor event /. You should see this website pop up. It'll give you some information, and it should say that it is the MDT monitoring event. If you don't get this web page after doing the steps listed before, then you'll probably need to go back and check your server name, as that's the biggest misconfiguration. Once this is configured and verified, you can start to test your own brand new monitoring system by running a deployment and waiting for the file to appear in the monitoring folder. While your deployment is running, let's take a look at some of our completed files here. As you can see, there are several pieces of information that the default monitoring service will give you. For instance, at the very top, we have the ID of the monitoring file, which is just the number in chronological order. It also shows the workstation that was ran on, the deployment status, which usually is either running, completed, or failed, the steps bar, which while in your deployment should show you what step it is currently on, and if completed, will show you all steps have been completed. The last section here is going to be the errors and the warnings. Now this will pop up when you're watching this monitoring service, and you can determine what step correlates with the error message by using this monitoring service. Now the only downfall to this particular monitoring service is it doesn't actually give you a granular look of what actually went wrong during the steps, right? So we're going to go ahead and show you actually how to create some logging that'll give you more granular detail on what went wrong during your deployments. The basic monitoring does have some great features, especially when just determining whether or not your deployment was successful or it failed. However, logging is going to give you a lot more granular detail about what services are running during the deployment and how those are being processed and if they fail or not. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to set up a basic log file and how to read it. First thing you'll need to configure for basic logging is to create a folder that your MDT users can access with read-write. To make this process a little bit easier, we created our log file in the root of our MDT shared folder located on our computer at C:\deployment share /log files. Once created, you will need to share this folder out. Here's our shared access. We set for everyone to have read-write permissions, but you can select specific groups or individual users for a little bit more security. But you will need to make sure that any accounts that actually have access to run the MDT deployments need to have this read-write access. Once we have our folder created and it's shared out, we need to add a couple of lines to your deployment share rules. So we're going to go back to our MDT software. We're going to go ahead and right click on it once again, and we're going to pull up the rules tab now. So you'll see the default section here, and the first line that we're going to put in is SL share equals your server name / file location. For example, our pathway is LS share equals server B -deployment share $log files. Now, if you set up your deployment share folder to be hidden using the $, you will need to specify this, otherwise the log will not find this folder. So please make sure that you actually go through and put the $, in your deployment pathway if needed. This specific rule will copy all of the logs at the end of the deployment from the client and puts it into a folder that you specified above. The nice thing too is these logs are broken down into stages of the deployment to give you a more granular look at what's being processed. The second line we will need to put into the rules section is the SL share dynamic logging equals the server name again and the file location again. This actually creates a bdd.log file that encompasses the entire deployment from start to finish with real-time logs. Now that these are in the rules area, the next time you start a deployment, you should see a BDD file created automatically in the folder location you specified, which is a great test to see if the pathway is working correctly. Now, how are we going to access this BDD file? Well, a great way that we can access this file is by using an old tool called CMTrace. Now, Microsoft, in its all wisdom, actually doesn't provide this as a single application install. It's a packaged version that is used with the SCCM software. Now, the version of the SCCM software we downloaded was 2012. But you can also get the 2007 version, which does provide the same application. So when we get the SCCM package installed, we can go ahead and find the BDD file, right click and select Open With. We will select what's called the Configuration Manager Trace Log Tool. You should see this, which will provide all of the logs and color code them. So for instance, if we go to this particular section, you'll notice that each step is broken down into its own little area. And at the beginning of those steps, you will see a red icon to split the in-between from where the last one ends and where the first one starts. If you see this, this is a good indication, and this will also be red for error messages. Usually if nothing goes wrong and the deployment is successful, no colors will be there, but you can also see green, yellow, and red as the total colors. If you do see anything in red outside of just breaking up the steps in this BDD file, you'll just need to go through and double click on it, and it will open with a bit more information for you to troubleshoot. And there you have it. This was just a basic look at how to initially configure monitoring and logging in MDT. And there are, of course, many other features included in the software, including other different monitoring services. We hope you learned something from this short guide and that the information we provided will help you going forward with any of your MDT endeavors. Thank you very much and have a great day.